The galaxy had seen many things across billions of years, but never had the greatest warriors of known space gathered for something so strange as this. The Kelthran champions, whose combat records span millennia without a single defeat, floated silently in cloaked observation posts above the small blue planet called Earth, the Valorian elite guard. Genetically perfected through 10,000 generations, watched with their enhanced senses in full alert mode, the legendary Axion protectors, who had defended entire star systems from extinction-level threats, maintained their vigil from their hidden positions. All of them had been summoned by the High Council, told only that they needed to observe and understand what they would witness in the coming days. Commander Helen Mitchell stood at the edge of a massive training field, her eyes sharp despite the early morning darkness. The United States Military Academy at West Point had been running their summer exercises for 3 days now, and today was the final test that would determine which recruits had the strength to continue and which would be sent home. The young soldiers before her ranged in age from 18 to 25. All of them volunteers who had chosen this path of service. Each one carried the weight of personal sacrifice to be here, leaving families and comfortable lives behind for something greater than themselves. The aliens did not understand this concept at all. Commander Helen began to speak to her recruits, explaining the day ahead in clear, simple terms. They would face a course that tested not just their bodies, but their minds and their commitment to one another. The rules were straightforward. Individuals could not complete this course alone. They had to work as a unit, meaning if one person failed, the entire team failed. If someone gave up, the mission would be impossible. Everyone had to find strength inside themselves that they did not know existed. The recruits looked nervous but ready. Helen could see it in their eyes. The determination and the fear mixed together. They knew this was coming. They had trained for weeks. They had pushed themselves in ways they never imagined possible in their civilian lives. But this test was different. This was the moment where the weak would break and the strong would prove their worth high above the planet. In vessels cloaked from human detection, the alien observers began their analysis. The Kelthran commander, known only by his rank since his true name could not be spoken by humanoid vocal cords, watched the humans scatter across the field. He had defeated 900,000 enemies in direct combat. His tactical understanding was considered legendary throughout the galaxy. Yet, something about this simple human exercise intrigued him. The first obstacle was a wall made of thick wooden logs, stacked 20 feet high. The humans had to get everyone over it. The wall had no ladder, no handholds, just sheer vertical surface. A few of the soldiers were naturally strong, blessed with muscular builds that made them taller and more powerful. The weaker ones, the ones with less obvious strength, looked up at the wall with uncertainty. Then something unexpected happened. One of the strongest soldiers, a young man named David Cooper, did not climb the wall himself. Instead, he positioned himself at the base and began to help lift other soldiers up. He pushed them from below while others at the top pulled. He worked so hard that sweat poured down his face. His muscles shook with exhaustion, but he did not stop until every single person had made it over the wall. Only then, when everyone was on the other side, did he allow others to help him climb. The alien observers made notes. The Kelthran commander analyzed this behavior, trying to understand its tactical value. A solitary being would have climbed first, secured the position, and then forced weaker individuals to fend for themselves by sacrificing his own comfort and position. This human had ensured complete unit stability. But why? Why not just complete the mission with those fit enough to continue? The course continued for hours. The young soldiers crawled through mud pits that left them covered in filth. They carried heavy logs together across open fields. The pain on their Faces was visible, even from high above. They seemed even from high above. They seemed to hurt in ways that the aliens could not fully comprehend. Their bodies had limitations that were shocking to creatures designed for perfection. There was a moment when a young woman named Margaret Flynn collapsed from exhaustion near the end of the course. Her legs simply would not move anymore. The pain and fatigue had overcome her physical ability to continue. Her team could have left her and finished the exercise themselves. No rule required them to wait for her. No tactical advantage came from helping her, but they stopped. Every single member of her unit stopped and turned back. They surrounded her, encouraging her with words that the alien sensors could barely translate. One soldier named Kevin Harrison lifted her onto his shoulders and carried her for the final stretch. They were all suffering, all exhausted, but they refused to leave one of their own behind. When Margaret finally crossed the finish line, she was not alone. She was surrounded by people who had suffered alongside her. The Valorian elite guard commander, watching from his cloaked vessel, turned to his adjutant in confusion. This made no logical sense. The human who had carried the exhausted female had severely compromised his own physical status by taking on additional weight. He had increased his own pain and suffering to ease hers. Why would an individual choosing to increase their own suffering be considered valuable as the day ended? And the soldiers collapsed onto the ground, completely spent and covered in mud and sweat. Something remarkable happened. Instead of celebration or rest, the humans began to help each other. The strongest assisted the weakest toward medical stations where cuts and scrapes were tended. They shared water and food. They held conversations that seemed to focus not on individual achievement, but on mutual respect and shared experience. The alien observers fell silent all across their hidden vessels. The greatest warriors the galaxy had ever known sat in contemplation. None of them had answers for what they were witnessing. The humans had not displayed superior weapons. They had no genetic modifications that made them perfect. They were fragile and weak by any objective measure, yet something about what they had seen made the mighty warriors question everything they thought they understood about strength and value and what it truly meant to be powerful. Night fell over Earth, and the young soldiers slept in their tents, unaware that they were being studied by the universe's most legendary military minds. Above them in the darkness and the stars, the Kelthran, the Valorian, and the Axion warriors continued to take notes and ask questions and struggle to understand a concept that seemed impossible in their perfect and isolated worlds, a concept called sacrifice, a concept called choosing others before yourself, a concept that the humans seemed to understand in their very bones, even though they were nothing special at all by any measure that mattered in the galaxy. The second day of observation brought even more puzzling behavior. The humans had rested for only a few hours before returning to their training areas. Their bodies showed the damage from the previous day, yet they moved with purpose and determination. That made the alien observers adjust their instruments to make sure they were reading the data correctly. Commander Helen Mitchell had planned a tactical exercise that would force the recruits to make difficult decisions under pressure. The humans were split into two opposing forces, each tasked with completing a mission while preventing the other team from achieving theirs. A mock ammunition was used, harmless paint rounds that would mark a soldier as eliminated if struck, but the psychological weight of being shot and removed from combat was clearly significant. One of the most talented soldiers in the training group was a young man named Robert Hayes, who had shown exceptional leadership qualities throughout the entire program. He was smart, quick-thinking, and physically capable. Yet on this day, something happened that changed the entire dynamic of the observation. Robert was shot early in the exercise. marked by paint on his vest. He was technically eliminated and should have left the field. But instead of walking away, he used his knowledge to guide his teammates through a concealed communication system. He could not fight, but he could think. He could remember the terrain and the positions of the enemy. He could advise and coach his team members toward victory, even though he could not participate in the actual combat. The Axiom protectors who had watched entire civilizations grow and fall watched this behavior with new interest. A being who had lost their ability to directly contribute still found ways to be valuable. A creature who could not win through personal prowess found worth in helping others achieve. The tactical advantage was marginal, but the commitment to team success over personal glory was absolute. Another incident occurred that morning that deeply affected all the observers. A young soldier named Elizabeth Rodriguez made a critical navigation error during a route march mission. Her mistake could have caused the entire unit to become completely lost in a simulated scenario. The error was significant and could have cost lives in real combat circumstances. When the mistake was discovered, Elizabeth expected to be removed from the program. Instead, something entirely different happened. Commander Mitchell gathered the unit and used the mistake as a teaching opportunity rather than punishing Rodriguez for her error. The entire unit spent extra hours learning the correct navigational methods. They studied maps together. They practiced together. They made sure that not only would Elizabeth understand these methods, but that every single soldier would be able to do them correctly. The message was clear. We do not eliminate those who fail. We teach them to succeed. The Kelfran commander, who had for centuries believed that weakness should be purged immediately to maintain strength, found himself questioning this philosophy. What if weakness was not a burden to be removed, but a problem to be solved through education and practice? What if the value of a group was not measured by removing the weakest, but by elevating the weakest to match the strongest? On the third day, a situation emerged that truly tested the human understanding of rules and justice. A senior officer named Captain Susan Wells was running a training scenario when she noticed that the exercise parameters had created an unsafe situation. The safety margin was smaller than regulations allowed. The risk to her soldiers was higher than it should be. She faced a choice. She could ignore the issue and complete the exercise as ordered. She could report the problem and accept responsibility for delaying the timeline. Susan chose to report the problem to her commanding officer. She risked her position of authority. She potentially risked her future career. She walked into the office of her superior and explained the safety concern with clear evidence and solid reasoning. What happened next was unexpected by the alien observers. Rather than being punished, Susan was praised. The safety protocols were adjusted. The exercise was redesigned. Her willingness to speak up even when it was uncomfortable, even when it could harm her personally, was recognized as valuable. The institution that Susan served learned from her input and became better. The Valorian elite guard had been genetically designed to follow orders without question. For 10,000 generations they had believed that obedience was the highest virtue to aspire to, yet here they witnessed humans choosing something else. They chose to speak truth, even when truth was inconvenient, even when truth could result in personal loss. These humans believed that loyalty to people and safety mattered more than loyalty to hierarchy over. The following days, the alien observers began to catalog specific behaviors that seemed unique to human culture. They noticed that humans routinely comforted one another when distressed. A soldier named James Patterson saw a young recruit crying about missing his family and sat with him for an hour, simply listening. Patterson did not try to fix the problem or make it go away. He simply acknowledged the pain and offered companionship. They noticed that humans celebrated each other's achievements, as if the achievements belonged to everyone. An entire unit would cheer when one person reached a difficult goal. They understood that individual success was also collective success. They seemed to understand that a rising tide lifted all boats. They noticed that humans made jokes and found humor even in the midst of hardship. A group led by Private Monica Garcia would laugh together late into the evening, sharing stories that made them forget their aches and pains for a while. Humor seemed to be a form of strength among these creatures, not a weakness or a distraction. The alien warriors discussed these observations constantly in their hidden vessels. The Kelthran commander began to wonder if perfection might not be the goal they had. Always believed it to be the Valorian elite guard, questioned whether they had been designed correctly if they could not feel what these humans felt. The Axion protectors started to understand why they had been chosen for a mission of observation. Rather than intervention, the humans did not seem to be training to become perfect. They seemed to be training to become better than they were, while accepting that perfection was impossible. They trained to support one another. They trained to grow together. They trained to trust each other with their lives, and they did all of this knowing that they could fail. The aliens had always failed through weakness. Nothing failed in their experience except inferior design and poor genetic selection. But humans embraced the possibility of failure. They walked toward difficult challenges, knowing they might fall. They did it anyway. By the end of the second full day of observation, the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever known had more questions than answers. They had come to evaluate whether humans posed a threat to the established order. They had come expecting to find either inferior creatures to be dismissed or superior threats to be neutralized. Instead, they had found something they could not yet categorize. The fourth day of observation brought a realization that would shake the foundations of how the alien races understood themselves and their place in the universe. The humans were afraid. The Kelthran warriors had not understood fear in thousands of years. Genetic modification had removed the capacity for it from their species. Fear was seen as a weakness that compromised decision-making. The Valorian elite had engineered themselves beyond fear generations ago. The Axion protectors had transcended fear through centuries of meditation and spiritual practice. Fear did not exist in their world anymore, yet the humans were visibly terrified. During their exercises, their hands shook. They made mistakes from anxiety. Their breathing became rapid and shallow. Their faces showed the physical symptoms of genuine fear, and yet they continued anyway. They moved forward, despite the fear, not because they had no fear commander. Helen Mitchell understood this. She began to teach her recruits about what courage actually meant in simple terms. That even the highest caliber soldiers needed to hear courage is not the absence of fear. She told them courage is fear plus action. Corporal James Patterson embodied this concept perfectly. James had discovered a serious flaw in one of the advanced training exercises. The scenario had a genuine safety risk that could result in serious injury. Patterson knew that pointing out this flaw would make him look weak. It would suggest that he was afraid of the training. It could damage his reputation among the officers who controlled his future in the military academy. James could have stayed silent. He could have completed the exercise and hoped that nothing bad happened. Instead, he requested a meeting with the senior training officer and laid out his concerns. With clear evidence and documentation, he explained the safety, risk, and the recommended fixes. He did this knowing that the officers could reject his concerns and mark him as someone who was afraid. What James did not know was that the alien observers were watching this moment very carefully. The Kelthran commander leaned forward in his observation chair. This was it. He was finally seeing what he needed to see to understand these creatures. James Patterson was trembling physically. You could see it in the footage. His heart rate was elevated. His voice slightly shook as he made his case, and yet he delivered his message with perfect clarity and conviction. James Patterson had felt fear. He had acknowledged it internally and then chosen to act against it anyway. The fear did not paralyze him. It did not prevent him from speaking. The fear was not the master of his actions. He was when the senior training officer praised Corporal Patterson for his courage in speaking up and immediately began implementing the safety recommendations that James had suggested. The alien observers finally began to understand. The Kelfrin commander realized that he had spent 5,000 years confusing strength with the absence of weakness. Strength was not about having no fear. Strength was about having fear and choosing the right action. Anyway, the Valorian elite guard made a shocking discovery. While watching the human dynamics, humans seemed to need pain to grow. The discomfort of physical training seemed to actually strengthen them rather than weaken them. A human who was challenged too much would struggle but eventually rise to meet the challenge. A human who was comfortable would stagnate and eventually lose their edge. The Valorian had always designed for optimal conditions, perfect temperature, perfect nutrition, perfect living environments, and yet their youth showed signs of aimlessness and lack of drive. Humans seemed to struggle to find meaning over the course of the exercises. The alien observers noticed that humans had created systems to preserve the weakest among them. The military protocols specifically protected the smallest soldiers and gave them support. The strongest soldiers had rules about how hard they could push the weakest. There were systems in place to ensure that the most vulnerable humans received care and attention. This was the opposite of how the universe worked everywhere else in galactic civilization. The strong consumed the weak. The strong inherited the resources and the weak either adapted or were removed from the population. The concept of deliberately preserving weakness and investing resources into helping the weak was shockingly foreign. Yet, when the alien observers watched the humans do this, their feelings were complicated. The Axion protectors, who had spent centuries defending others, suddenly saw themselves reflected in these fragile creatures. The Axion had always felt a pull toward protection, toward sacrifice, toward putting others before themselves, and they had long wondered if this feeling was abnormal, or if perhaps all truly strong beings felt this way, and only the lesser civilizations designed themselves differently. On the morning of the 5th day, something remarkable happened. During a seemingly routine training exercise, a young soldier named Kevin Harrison proposed a new method for completing an obstacle course using different positioning and timing. His method was simpler and faster than the standard procedure. The other recruits immediately embraced the idea, and they all switched to Kevin's method. The drill sergeants could have rejected this innovation. They could have insisted that official procedures be followed instead. Instead, they called Kevin Harrison forward. They praised his thinking and his problem-solving. They told him that the military was successful, not because everyone followed the same script, but because people like him were willing to think and adapt and improve. The system was not static, it was dynamic, and it remained strong because strong minds within it continuously asked whether things could be done better. The Kelthran commander understood then what had taken him 5,000 years of warfare to finally learn. True strength was not rigidity, it was flexibility. True strength was not control, it was trust. True strength was not the elimination of weakness, but the cultivation of others. By the end of the 5th day of observation, the alien warriors had reached consensus. All of them felt it, a deep recognition that something profound was happening on this small blue world. Humans seemed to understand something essential about what mattered. The humans seemed to know that life was about more than perfection, or power, or individual achievement. life seemed to be about connection, about lifting others, about choosing to be better than your circumstances. Demanded every single day, the Kelthran commander sent a message to the High Council: we need to stay longer. We need to watch these humans more. We need to understand how they do this. We need to learn from them. The message was unprecedented in the history of the 5,000-year-old Kelthran civilization. A warrior asking permission to learn from inferiors, a mighty being asking for education from the weak and fragile. The High Council approved the extended observation, but deep in the encrypted channels of their hidden vessels, the greatest warriors of the galaxy began asking each other impossible questions. What if humans were not inferior at all? What if they were different in ways that actually made them superior? What if the universe had been preparing them for something important and nobody had realized it? The sixth day began like all the others, with the humans running their exercises in the early morning light. The alien observers had settled into a pattern of observation, taking extensive notes about human behavior and capabilities. They had begun to build complex models to explain how these fragile creatures could possibly maintain a civilization against the countless dangers of space and nature. Then everything changed. An emergency distress signal began broadcasting across multiple frequencies. A merchant vessel registered under the Kelthran Commercial Treaty was passing through the outer reaches of Earth space, carrying supplies and trade goods, when it encountered a catastrophic asteroid field. The pilot had attempted to navigate through, but the field was shifting unpredictably. The ship had lost power and was drifting directly into heavier concentrations of debris. The vessel would be destroyed within hours if rescue could not be achieved. The alien observers immediately recognized the situation. The captain of the merchant vessel had sent distress signals, but no other ships in the area had the capability to help. The outer rim was sparsely populated. The nearest official station was 3 days' travel away. The merchant vessel would be completely destroyed long before help could arrive under normal circumstances. The alien warships hidden above Earth had multiple options. They possessed the technological capability to rescue the ship in moments. They could dispatch advanced shuttles that would reach the merchant vessel in less than an hour, using faster-than-light drives that the humans could not even imagine. The rescue would be trivial. The cost would be nothing more than fuel and the time of a few crew members. The alien commanders faced a choice that many of them did not fully anticipate. They decided not to launch rescue operations immediately. Instead, they activated their sensors and trained every instrument they had on the humans below. They wanted to see what the humans with dual arms began sounding at the West Point train facility. The emergency broadcast system had been activated by federal authorities. The facility commander announced that a real crisis was unfolding, a ship in distress, a genuine emergency that was beyond the direct control or power of anyone on the ground. The commander made the decision to notify his military personnel of the situation and invite them to help think through any possible solutions. Commander Helen Mitchell and her recruits gathered in the main briefing hall. The situation was explained clearly. A ship was going to sink. Ships did not sink in space, but the metaphor was accurate. The ship was going to be destroyed, and the people aboard were going to die. Within hours, Helen presented the stark reality. We do not have the technology to reach them, she said. Our best resources are hours away from being useful. They will be gone before we can help. We do not have weapons that can clear asteroid fields. We do not have shields that can protect the vessel at large. The silence in the room was heavy and real. The humans had come face to face with the limits of their own capabilities, and they did not accept that. A young engineer named Kevin Harrison spoke up. What if we focus on communication instead of direct rescue? We have powerful broadcasting equipment. We could help the captain navigate through the field if we had better data about the asteroids. A technician named Rachel Miller brought up a resource list. We could task every weather satellite we have to scan that region. Every piece of information we can gather and transmit could help them avoid the larger. Debris Captain Susan Wells began coordinating logistics with the desperation of someone who refused to accept the unacceptable. What communication arrays do we have available? How quickly can we establish a direct line with the merchant vessel? What bandwidth can we push to Thema? Brilliant young mathematics student named Monica Garcia, who had volunteered for military service, began calculating trajectories. She worked with pure mathematics, the orbital patterns of asteroids, the physics of momentum and inertia, the possible paths the merchant vessel could take through the field. She worked frantically, feeding her calculations to the communications team. The alien observers were mesmerized. They watched humans with inferior technology and primitive instruments begin to coordinate a rescue effort that had virtually no chance of success. The humans were trying anyway. They were using every single resource they had. They were combining disciplines and knowledge in innovative ways. The humans seemed to understand that sometimes the only victory possible was the attempt itself. For 3 hours, the humans coordinated the West Point facility became a command center. The military personnel used their equipment to broadcast continuous navigation advice to the merchant vessel. They sent updated calculations every minute as Monica refined her mathematical models. They pushed the limits of their communication technology to maximize the bandwidth to the distant ship. They coordinated with every government agency that had any tool that might help, including weather services and satellite programs. The aliens watched as David Cooper manned the communication console for hours without rest. His voice was hoarse from repeating coordinates and warnings. His eyes were exhausted, but his focus never wavered. He understood that his voice might be the only thing between that merchant crew and death, so he did not rest. He did not stop Elizabeth. Rodriguez worked the mathematics with Monica Garcia, double-checking every calculation, because even a small error could send the ship into a cluster of debris. Both women understood that their work mattered. They worked as if every second was precious. James Patterson coordinated with commanders in other facilities, sharing data and collaborating on solutions. He made phone calls to universities requesting that physics professors help run better simulations of the asteroid field movement. He asked for help, and he received it because people wanted to be part of saving a life. The Kelthran commander sat in stunned silence. These humans knew they were probably going to fail. They did not have technology sufficient to the task. The odds were against them, yet they fought against the inevitable. They did not accept reality. They did not surrender. They did not tell the merchant vessel that help was coming from others. They took responsibility with their own hands. The human species seemed to believe that trying was valuable, even when success was unlikely, even when success was nearly impossible, even when failure was probable. The merchant vessel continued to broadcast as it navigated through the asteroid field. The captain reported that he was using the navigation coordinates provided by the humans. The captain reported that the trajectory calculations were accurate enough to avoid the largest concentrations of debris. The captain reported that he was still alive, still moving forward, still following the guidance of this blue planet that he had never heard of before. The alien observers realized something crucial in that moment. These humans did not know that rescue was impossible, only because they did not know the full truth. They did not know that advanced civilizations existed. They did not know that their efforts were being observed. They did not know that the alien vessels above them could save the ship in minutes. The humans simply saw other people in danger and responded with everything they had. They did not calculate odds and decide that failure was too probable. They did not accept limits that fate had placed upon them. They reached beyond their grasp and acted from the deepest part of their nature to help to save to matter. The merchant vessel made it through the asteroid field, not because the navigation calculations from the humans were perfect, but because they were good enough. The captain followed the guidance from the West Point facility and found a path through the danger. The ship was damaged and limping, but it was alive. The crew aboard was alive when the captain finally transmitted his successful message through to the humans below. There was a moment of pure joy that transcended all boundaries. David Cooper collapsed in his chair and wept, not from sadness but from relief and joy. The people he had been trying to save were going to live. His voice and the voices of his team had mattered. Elizabeth Rodriguez and Monica Garcia embraced each other. Their calculations vindicated by success. Commander Helen Mitchell stood in the communications center and simply watched her recruits celebrate. She felt something in her chest, something that made her understand why she had chosen this life of service, why sacrifice and dedication mattered. Then the skies above Earth opened. 3 massive vessels simply became visible, appearing as if they had always been there, but invisible to human instruments. Before and suddenly now visible to every human on the planet. The vessels were enormous, kilometers across, with surfaces that seemed to shimmer with technologies that Earth had never developed. 3 warships of impossible sophistication and power descended toward the military facility. The humans froze. Some reached for weapons, knowing that their weapons would be useless against such technology. Others simply stared upward, wondering if this was the end of their civilization. A communication channel opened in every language. Human civilization possessed. An order to stand down came through clearly, but not in an aggressive manner. It was a request more than a command. The humans were asked to not resist, not to panic, and to prepare for contact. Alien vessels landed in a perfectly controlled descent that suggested technology beyond comprehension. When the doors of the primary vessel opened, representatives of 3 races emerged. The Kelthram warriors were visible first. Their forms were humanoid but elongated. Their features were precise, almost angular. Their eyes showed intelligence and discipline. Behind them came the Valorian elite guard, taller and more muscular than the Kelthran, with features that suggested genetic perfection and optimization for combat. Last came the Axiom protectors, beings whose forms were more fluid, more graceful, but radiating a sense of ancient wisdom and power. The Kelthran commander approached Helen Mitchell directly. The translation was immediate and clear to all humans present. My name translates roughly to Commander Theron. I represent the Kelthran Republic and the Military Council of the Outer Rim Sector. I was sent with my colleagues 6 days ago to evaluate your species. We were sent by the High Council to determine if humanity posed a threat to establish galactic civilization. We were sent to assess your military capabilities, your strategic thinking, and your danger level to the greater cosmic order. Helen Mitchell did not shrink from his gaze. I do not know what your conclusion was, but I know my people. We do not want war. Commander Theron nodded. We know that now because we observed you. Theron gestured to the other aliens, and they activated a holographic display that showed scenes from the training exercises. The humans watched themselves again and again. David Cooper lifting his teammates, wall climbing Monica Garcia, calculating trajectories, Kevin Harrison proposing innovations, James Patterson risking his career for safety, Elizabeth Rodriguez being taught by her team mates. Instead of being abandoned, we came to Earth expecting to find warriors. Theron continued. We came expecting to find either inferior creatures to be dismissed or superior threats to be eliminated. Instead, we found something we could not categorize. We found humans. For 6 days we watched you fail. Tests that we thought would break you seemed instead to transform you. We expected you to value individual achievement, but you valued the group. We expected you to preserve your strongest and discard your weakest, but you invested in all of your people. We expected you to follow orders blindly, but you spoke truth, even when truth was inconvenient. Most remarkably, we watched you today. We watched you learn of a crisis, a distant ship in danger. Had no obligation to help. You had no strategic advantage in saving that vessel. You could not even reach it with your technology, yet you coordinated every resource you had. You worked for hours without rest. You embraced the possibility of failure and moved forward anyway. Aaron turned to face all the humans who were gathered in the facility. Humans of Earth, I've spent 5,000 years in military service. I've won 900,000 battles and conflicts. I've been designed and trained to be the perfect warrior. Watching you today, I realized something. The ship that was in danger did not need better weapons. It did not need superior technology. It did not need genetic perfection. It needed exactly what you provided: navigation. Guidance from people who cared whether it lived or died. Theron gestured to the displays again. You were brave, not because you had no fear, but because you acted despite your fear. You were strong, not because you had perfect bodies, but because you refused to abandon anyone. You were heroic, not because you had superhuman capabilities, but because you chose to be heroic. Valorian elite commanders stepped forward. I am Commander Vox, and my people have been genetically designed for 10,000 years to be perfect. At every moment, we work within optimal parameters, optimized strength, optimized intelligence. We are exactly what we were designed to be, and we are not happy. We feel incomplete watching your soldiers. I saw something we had engineered. A way I saw struggle and growth. I saw pain leading to strength. I saw individuals becoming better than they were through effort and challenge. We were designed to eliminate these things, thinking them weaknesses. I think we may have been wrong. The Axiom Protector spoke last. Her voice was gentle and ancient. I am called Keeper of Shadows, and my people have watched galactic civilization for 300,000 years. We have protected countless species. We have believed ourselves to be guardians and protectors. But watching you today, I realize that you do not need protection. What you do is protect. You choose to protect. You choose to sacrifice humans of Earth. You are not the strongest species in the galaxy. You are not the most advanced. We are more powerful than you in every measure of strength that we have. We have more impressive technology. We have greater physical capabilities. We've existed longer, but you have something we have mostly lost. You have the ability to choose who you will become. You have the ability to value others above yourselves. You have the ability to care about individuals. You have the ability to try, even when odds are impossible. You have somehow created meaning in a universe that does not care about meaning. Commander Theron continued. The High Council sent us here to evaluate whether you were a threat. We are returning to the Council with a different assessment. We believe humanity should be invited to join the greater galactic community, not as subjects or servants, not as allies seeking protection, but as something that has become rare, something precious, something the universe needs. We believe that Earth should take its place among the greatest civilizations in known space, and we believe you should do it as yourselves. Do not abandon your values to join us. Do not lose what makes you remarkable. Do not forget that sacrifice and courage and loyalty matter more than power. Helen Mitchell felt tears on her face alongside the tears of her recruits. The speech was over, but the weight of what had been said would carry forward. The universe was vast and cold and mostly indifferent. But these three great warrior civilizations had come to Earth to witness something they had almost forgotten existed: hope, compassion. The beautiful, terrible choice to be better than you must be. David Cooper looked at his team and realized that every day they had been training for something bigger than themselves, something that mattered across galaxies and star systems. The West Point training program was not just military training. It was the moment that Earth showed the universe who it was. Elizabeth Rodriguez understood that her mistake and her team's response to it had mattered for reasons she would never fully know. James Patterson understood that speaking truth, even when it was difficult, had influenced not just his facility, but the entire course of human history. Monica Garcia understood that her calculations had saved lives, not just on that merchant vessel, but potentially millions of lives, because the humans of Earth had now earned the respect and alliance of the greatest warriors in known space. As The sun set over West Point. The alien visitors remained on the ground. They began to ask questions of the human commanders. They wanted to understand more. They wanted to learn more. They wanted to know the true nature of this strange species that had somehow discovered strength in compassion and power in unity. Humans answered their questions with openness and honesty, knowing that this moment was a turning point, a moment where Earth would step into a greater world. But not as something trying to become greater. They stepped forward as what they already were, heroes in ways that had nothing to do with weapons or technology or perfect design heroes, because they had chosen to be heroic heroes. Because when given the chance to be selfish, they had chosen sacrifice heroes, because they understood that the greatest strength in the universe was the ability to lift others up and help them become more than they were before.